Here we have a made up database consisting of student grades. And we're going to use this today to illustrate the concept of VLOOKUP, but more importantly, how to deal with some of the errors that occur when using the VLOOKUP formula. And in particular, you can see here that we've got this hash NA that's been created by using this formula. And it's creating problems with our summary statistics when we're calculating the median and the average, and it's also creating problems when we're trying to determine a student's overall grade. So once again, we're getting all that information about the students in terms of their project, their mid-semester exam and the final exam, but when it comes to one of the students, they're simply not located in that database, and that's what's happening here with Nicholas Abood. So let's see a couple of ways in which we can deal with the issue and get around the problem. So let's just review the formula, what it's doing. So it's using the keyword VLOOKUP. Its lookup value is the student number. The database that it's going to is in the final exam spreadsheet, and it's starting with the first student number all the way down to the last student number and getting all the information we have about students in terms of what they did for the final exam and the grade they achieved. And it's returning the fourth column, which is the student grades for the final exam, if it finds an exact match. Now the problem here is with Nicholas, he didn't sit the final exam, so he's returning this error. So what can we do? Here's a couple of solutions. What I'm going to do first up is apply a filter. So if I select row 8, I click on data, on filter, we now bring up the filter interface for each of those variables that I've got in the database. If I click on the final exam drop box, it's showing all the student grades that are achieved, the lowest mark being 40, the highest mark being 93, and it's got this group of students who had a mark of hash NA, who didn't sit the final exam. So what I'm going to do is go back up to the top, unselect all students in the database, and only select those students for which we have an error. Press OK, and you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students for which we don't have a final exam grade. Now what I can do is copy and paste that group of students into a different spreadsheet. I might print that list and try and use that to locate the student grades, or I might invite them to do a supplementary exam. Whichever system you might have available to you, you might find that list very useful. But what we want to do is be able to get rid of this hash NA so that we can calculate the summary statistics for the rest of the cohort and report the final exam marks, final marks overall. So what I'm going to do, the quickest and easiest way to deal with that error is simply select them and press delete. And you can see now we have our summary statistics. We have final marks being created only on the basis of their project and mid-semester exam for that cohort, whereas everyone else is using that final exam grade. Likewise, I could have typed in the number 0 and copy and pasted that for the rest of the group for those 7 students, and they all got a 0. Okay, so that's one way to deal with the issue. However, what happens at a later time when you really want that formula to be automated? So maybe Nicholas you do locate that final exam and you simply want to update the formula automatically. How do we account for that? Well, what I'm going to do is just undo what we did and reselect all the data. So we've still got that error there. And what I'm going to do is create a new variable. I'm going to call it final 2 or final exam 2. And what I'm going to do is create a logical test that looks at that value, and if it is an error, put a 0. If it's not, return the original value. So in a bit more detail, equals if. Now there is an if error function which is available on the newer versions of Excel. So I'm going to use the another way to do it. Here's it's looking for a logical test. I'm going to use the is error function built into Excel. I'm going to look at whether that final exam grade that's being returned is an error. And so that's my logical test. Is that number being returned an error? If it is, what am I going to do if it's true? What am I going to do if it is an error? Well, I'm going to give that student a 0 grade for the moment. And if it's not, I'm going to return the original grade in L9. And you can see that works really nicely for not just Nicholas, but for all the other students for which we do have a grade. So as we get down to, say, someone like Jay Acosta, you can see that they actually did do the exam. They get a 71, and that's what it returns because there's no error in that statement. So that's a more complicated way to do it, but it does make things a little bit messy. Can we do everything simultaneously with that in mind? And yes, in fact, we can do that. So this is a much more advanced solution. So let's just see what I could do is get rid of this column, and I want to make it nice and easy to understand that, so we don't have to create new columns. So what I'm going to do is start with the VLOOKUP function. I'm going to copy that formula that we've got, and I'm going to combine it with that concept of an if statement. So around it, I'm going to put if is error. Okay, so it's looking at it. If that formula there is an error, I'm going to put in a 0. And if it's not, I'm going to once again look at the database and return what that number should be and close the bracket. Now that's a very complicated formula, but the advantage is that it's all in one nice single cell. It has only one column being created, and it's a little bit more logical to follow when we look at it. So I suppose it's a more advanced solution, but we can copy that all the way down. So now that our summary statistics get automatically calculated. So there we have it, is a number of ways to deal with the #NA error in Excel when using the VLOOKUP formula. I hope you found that very useful, and I'd invite you to visit the blog that we have available on large class teaching to ask any questions or to get some further ideas on how to deal with large classes. Thank you very much for your time.